Welcome to Connect to Develop, where we provide insight from healthcare leaders on the hottest topic and trends.
Hello, listeners, and thank you for tuning in to hear us talk about the art of servant leadership with an incredible leader in the spine medtech space. Jeremy Laynor is the Senior Vice President of Sales for Providence Medical Technologies. Jeremy has over 15 years experience in leading teams in his previous role, and as someone who personally was hired and mentored by him, I can actually attest to his servant leadership technique. Hey, Jeremy, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Marnie, great to be here. Thank you very much.
Jeremy, can you talk about what servant leadership means to you?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's kind of a philosophy of leadership versus the end all. It's not the only approach, but in my mind, it's really a philosophy of leadership in which, you're serving your team as a key driver versus just focusing on outcomes of the team at all costs. And through that approach, there's a whole bunch of nuance to that, but the foundation is that, very high emotional intelligence and really have a lot of curiosity about the members of your team and finding ways to put them in a position to be wildly successful. When they are, collectively, the team's very successful.
So you talked about a few things, and the whole focus on outcomes at all costs brings to mind that interview question that I think a lot of med tech interviewers use, do you love to win or do you hate to lose? So do you feel like servant leadership was just kind of innately how you are, or was it a skill set that you actively worked on?
When I was a young manager, first job at Cardinal Health, and, had just been promoted, did not have really a whole lot of formal, management training. I was kind of a field sales trainer and had been developed by others, other mentors and whatnot. But I remember being kind of rigid and really focused on the outcome and following, because I didn't know what I was doing, following, what I had seen, what I experienced, and what my manager or regional director was, telling us to kind of achieve. And a lot of that had to do with the way I may approach it. And as I evolved as a leader and kind of got my legs under me and understood what worked and didn't work, I think is where the servant leadership started to emerge. And some of it, to your question, was probably innately there. I think I had a pretty decent starting point in terms of self-awareness and humility and some other emotional intelligence type, situations. But I think as you gain that experience and you're around other really talented leaders and just talented people, you start to understand, hey, I can get a lot more out of this person if I'm connected to them, if I build mutual trust, if I really do care and I'm authentic, I'm committed to their growth, not just the outcome of the thing I need them to do. And I can build a team around this theme and everybody's kind of in sync, in the same rhythm, and they have that trust and they understand you're authentic and you're a listener, and you're committed to what you're trying to accomplish, not just the final objective, but again, putting each of your team members in a position to be their best, get their best, extract the best out of them. That developed over time. So some of it was innate, some of it, I think, just some of the personality, some of the way maybe I was raised, some of my experience as an athlete, whatever, as a team member, being around some great coaches and mentors and other leaders. But then some of it you develop, I think, with, just the trials and tribulations of building teams and being part of earlier stage organizations where there's a lot of opportunity to make an impact, have a lot of autonomy, and make a lot of mistakes too, right? Both.
Oh, yeah. We know those. Erika, you also are a team builder. You're someone who likes to come in and flush out the best in someone. Do you know that you actively practice servant leadership? I mean, is this even a buzzword in leadership training?
I wouldn't say in training, Marnie. What I'm curious to know, Jeremy, too, just kind of on that note, is did you see that modeled around you? You spoke to kind of observing the leaders around you, which is some of what I had done too, but curious to know if that was the majority of what you kind of witnessed, experienced, and in your involvement, that's kind of what you drew from to add on to what you felt like was already innately there. Curious to know what that was like.
Yes, absolutely. Exposure to, what we would characterize today as servant leadership, but in pieces, right? some early managers in medical sales, I saw pieces of that where they really were acutely aware and keen to, hey, this is a talented person. What can I do to help develop them? And what are they interested in? And not just the tactical elements of what we were trying to accomplish. And so I kind of drew from that. And then, as an earlier manager working under, a really tenured VP in a very high stress environment, just seeing, how he was able to kind of cultivate and enroll people, right? So this term enrollment is more like you're persuading through a shared vision versus directing because of your title and demanding of others because of, your hierarchical position. And this kind of concept of enrolling others in a shared vision, I saw from some of the leaders I was around. So, some of those things were exposed to me, not all at once. It was in chunks and pieces over time. And each leader, good, bad, or in the middle, that I was exposed to, I got a little bit more from, and, maybe what to do, some ideas on that or exposure to that, and maybe some things that weren't going to work in my style. And didn't mean they were bad managers or bad leaders, but it just didn't fit what I thought would be kind of that best in class, leader, and really that kind of adopted this kind of servant leadership philosophy. And it's not one size fits all either. So that's a big part of this. That's why I kind of opened with the servant leadership. To me, isn't you're like a servant leadership style that only serves others. That I don't care about the outcome. I just want to build a great team that everybody loves each other. And it's like, we got to deliver business results. So as you move up higher in the food chain in organizations, there is times where you have to be very directive and very specific and make tough decisions. And, that doesn't discourage you from being a servant leader, but it's not a one size fits all. Certain reps, certain managers, certain folks under you need different approaches. It's not a one size fits all situation.
Did you find, Jeremy, that differed across different sizes of organizations? Because I can imagine you're talking about kind of finding that fine line between, adopting this philosophy, keeping people accountable, kind of focusing on outcomes and performance, while also having really that philosophy kind of just really embedded in the day in and day out of operating with your team. Did you find that is different with smaller companies versus mid-sized companies, large? Just curious to know if you feel like that plays a part in this.
I think it's really interesting to, consider that. And, I've been pretty fortunate to be part of really small, early stage, mid stage, and then very, very large. And I would say that it applies across all sizes of organizations and in all verticals of business and, beyond probably even business as well. So I think the concept and the philosophy can work it's completely exclusive of the size. Now, where I think things get kind of interesting and nuanced is when you're in a very early stage startup environment, maybe it's a small company and you're tasked with making some really critical decisions at high speeds, and you have maybe very small room for error because, you might go out of business or run out of funding. It really tests your ability to maybe stick to to kind of the core philosophy of servant leadership. But I think when you build those legs and those muscles over time, that that's the right way to do it. You don't default to directive and outcomes at all cost. But you still have to yield, you got to move the ball forward and you got to make good decisions, but you're still trying to build the trust. You're still being authentic. You're still, committed to the growth of your team members. And that, I think humility is a big part of servant leadership. And that crosses all sizes and scopes, because the bigger orgs, there's all this titling and there's politicking. And I think anybody that's worked at the bigger orgs knows what I'm talking about. And at the end of the day, being humble and having humility to know that no matter what your title is, you can learn from everybody. You're going to get it wrong, and it's okay to pivot and change. I'm a big proponent for planning, but your plan is going to only withstand initial contact with the enemy. As soon as you start your plan, you need to change it, and having the humility and the humbleness to know that that's okay. and it doesn't make you lesser of a leader that you have to pivot or do something different than you had initially designed is okay. I think in the bigger, huge orgs, you start to see people falling into that trap. They get a certain title or a level, then I don't want to sit with people that are, 3 levels down from me at a meeting or that they don't have anything to share with me that could be of interest. I'm going to stick with my peer group or above, and that kind of politicking thing. But, other than that, I think philosophy crosses all sizes and shapes of orgs.
I have to imagine that being a leader of sales teams has to be the hardest to maintain servant leadership, because every month the value that you provide to your organization resets. Okay, you were number 1 last month, but you're number 4 this month. You're almost fired. So what advice do you have to give to leaders out there in a high pressure situation where they have deliverables that almost on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis hit and reset, and you've got a team of all different personality types? You've got the person that's going to drive and motivate themselves, no matter what's happening. You've got the person that needs a little bit more cajoling. You've got the person that, likes to go to boot camp and get screamed at because that's what motivates them. What advice do you have to the managers on how they can maintain servant leadership to still pull out the best in their people, to still deliver those results in those high pressure settings?
Yeah, you nailed it, Marney. It's such a crazy environment, especially in the monthly, almost the weekly. Data's coming at us so fast that just numbers and metrics are just in front of us all the time, and you're constantly under that pressure and that weight. And I think it comes back to your foundation and having the confidence that, people that work for you, and if you're leading whatever size team, you're a first line manager or managing managers or managing a whole org, if they know, again, you build that trust in that, you're leading from the front, you're doing things that you're asking others to do, you set a great example, high integrity, and you build that authenticity and people believe in you, you're going to get the best out of them. Now, does that mean that you can't hold people accountable? No, that's part of the integrity. That's part of servant leadership too, is that you hold others accountable on the team, because if somebody's not pulling their weight on the team and everybody else is going, hey, what's going on there? There's a really low performer. And maybe it's not low performance in that they're missing their numbers, but they're actually not doing the tasks that everybody's committed to doing as a team, and you don't hold them accountable. That's a break in integrity. So at some point that needs to be addressed, and that builds respect across the whole team. So within, especially in like med tech sales, spine orthopedics, implant sales, very high stakes, customers are worth millions of dollars, that type of thing. Like, a lot of people can bend their integrity or, change that approach. But I think if your foundation, your pillars are really strong, and again, a lot of that comes with time. You can't learn that in a day or a week or a year. You got to go through it for a while. But for newer managers, is like, keep doing the right thing, keep building those relationships with your team, but hold people accountable. Don't be on a pedestal, be out there with them. Understand the business, be super curious, like really get into the nuance of the business and add value. And your team will recognize that and go rally behind you.
Can you talk a little bit more about how you hold people accountable, kind of using that philosophy? Like, if you do have someone that hasn't, been meeting those metrics or KPIs monthly, those sales goals, give us an example, Jeremy, because I think what happens is anyone who's looking to potentially adopt or kind of exploring what this leadership style looks like day in and day out in practice, that's the challenge. There's a balance between how do I hold people accountable and help them grow while still keeping true to the foundation of the leadership, like you mentioned. So just curious to know if you can give us a scenario.
I would say, like, one word that just jumps out as you're asking that question is transparency. Like, super high level of transparency, visibility to, a common objective, or so just we're on the same page, right? So it's like, the example would be, rep, A, it's like, hey, here's the goals. You've been missing them, correct? Yes, great. These are the objectives we all kind of align to at the beginning of the quarter, the month, the year, whatever it is. Yep. Okay, good. No miscommunication there. And then all along the way, and I think Marney would have just this, like, performance management to me is not a one-time affair. It's not a annual performance review. It's like every field guide. It's every week. It's every month. You're talking about those same transparent goals and objectives, and the pursuit of those where you're missing, right? Do we agree? Like, hey, you're missing this quarterly sales goal. Well, how do you drive sales? Well, it depends on your industry, but it's like, how many meetings did you drive? How, and I don't want to get into the sales process. It's very nuanced and stuff, but it's like, you just start going down those layers, and they're very specific metrics that you agree on a week, monthly, quarterly basis that, hey, we might be missing the overall number, but you're doing these other things really well, which gives me a lot of confidence that this is going to work for us. Yes. And then if it's not, you keep going down a layer to say, hey, well, where's the breakdown? Where are we missing? It's like, oh, you're not making enough sales calls. Like, why not? I can't get access to the customer. Why not? Well, you're not doing this, this, and this. Well, let's try and get you, trying this activity. Look at what this rep's doing. I'm going to get you on a field ride so you can see how they gain access and make total office calls, or, they're using LinkedIn, or they're using an inside sales team, whatever it is. And you find those gaps, and you both agree to the steps that you're going to take to remedy the situation. But inevitably, if they decide or can't do that, because sales in particular and like med tech is hard, some people aren't cut out for it. Not their skill set. They're not that good at it. They don't have a good work ethic, whatever it is. And eventually you have to make, those tough decisions. But if it's in the spirit of transparency, you're on the same page, that it's an ongoing discussion, not a one-time affair, then I think, there's going to be mutual respect, even if you have to make a tough decision to go in a different direction. At least everybody knew the whole time what was happening.
I'm sitting here chuckling because I literally have this flashback. So kind of shed a little context. The way that I met Jeremy was, 16 something years ago, as, I sat in a lobby of a Lowe's hotel in Los Angeles doing my first interview, and he had just gotten out of cases. And so he was telling me a little bit about the job, and Jeremy, got into this surgical device company, knocked it out of the park, won, rep of the year, and then was given an option of, I think, 3 or 4 different territories or areas to go manage. And one of them was the top region in the country, and one of them was the bottom region of the country. And Jeremy likes a challenge, thank goodness for me, because he picked the worst performing area in the country, and I was his first hire out of that. And I just have to chuckle because he could not have walked into a more diverse team with different experience levels, different thought processes. I was brand new. And the transparency, he used a lot of humor. So he highlighted a lot of things on calls. And I feel like what you did, Jeremy, was you created transparency without making people feel bad. So you always highlighted the top 3 things that someone did. And it didn't even necessarily have to do with, points on the board per se. It was more, so-and-so got in front of a doctor that they've been trying to access for 2 years, and this is the creative thing, they did it. And then I remember some of my KPIs when I was trying to get through all the value analysis committee meetings in San Diego was, get a case. Did you get through the value analysis case? So for about a month it was, did you get into the OR? Nope. Okay, let's do these things. Did you get into the OR? So I just have to chuckle on the whole transparency and all that.
Yeah, you lived through that. You were an example of somebody that was doing all the right activities with no results. There's no revenue results. And it was really hard because you were doing it all right. It's like, well, if we replace her and the person comes in and does all the right things, we've just moved backwards. Like, she's doing all the right things. It's going to come eventually. And obviously, it did.
So that's a great question, actually, is you were involved enough to know that you were with me every other week, and there were a couple other people too that you were with on a weekly, bi-weekly basis, and you believed that they were just going to hit, and it paid off, right? Everyone on your team walked across that stage and got President's Club, Rolex Club, stock auctions, multiple times and stuff. But when does a manager know when, even if they're doing all the right things, they just don't have it, and you got to cut bait and run?
I don't know if there's any answer to that, because you're really looking for those leading activities that are going to result in the objective, the sale, the whatever it is. And you break it down to the smallest parts, and you're following your process. And at some point, if you keep making excuses, and I've done this a lot, where you really like the person, you're rooting for them, they're doing everything in your mind to yield the result, but there's just something missing. And sometimes it's nothing to do with talent. It just has something to do with timing, wrong place, wrong time, bad luck. I mean, all sorts of stuff. And it's a little bit of gut, and it's a little bit of going, okay, look, We've tried all these things. I'm working extremely hard as the manager, the reps trying, and you got to give some empathy to them, say maybe they're going to do really, really well doing something else. And this is just the wrong seat on the bus at the wrong time. And if I release them from this bind, they're going to be wildly successful somewhere else. And I can think of a lot of people that I've, worked with, either managed directly or indirectly, or just been in the same org that happened, and they went on to do really great things. It was just at a different role. It just wasn't a good fit. And, I don't know if that's a clear enough answer, because I don't know the trigger, but I do know there is a point you got to cut bait, and it's for both parties. It's not always just like you're terminating because they miss it. It's like you're helping them, freeing them up to go be successful somewhere.
Yeah.
It's you bring up so much in what you just shared, Jeremy, because you're talking about making sure, one, that team members are in the right seat. It's kind of, you always hear that sports analogy. Yeah. Take a center, you put them to play point guard or just they're out of alignment and out of sync. And part of the exercise, I would imagine, in kind of going through the scenario that Marney just painted and your, just the experiences. Okay, are people in the right seats? Are they able to be optimized in the seat that they're sitting in? And if not, how else can they potentially add value? I know you're probably going through all of those scenarios before getting to the point where you're like, okay, this is not working. My follow-up question to that is, in your experience, have you seen using servant leadership kind of unlocks the potential? Like, have you kind of just seen, like, if you're just continuously recognizing something in someone who's just might be in the wrong seat, but you've leveraged that servant leadership to kind of unlock that there's still potential there?
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's the commitment to the growth of the person, not just to the committing to the goal or using, the working unit to get the labor, to get the result. So if you're committed to the person as well, which fits right in line with servant leadership, then you're going, hey, man, they're really talented. They're just they can't do this skill really well. You know what? I think they need rounded out doing this other thing. And there's multiple examples of that. And I will cite one specifically. I had a rep, it was an associate rep, and they were working under one of our best people. They were doing a great job, kind of got stuck in that associate role a little longer than we typically would see them. They ended up leaving the org because I think they got frustrated. But I was like, man, that person's really talented. We created another role that I thought would be a perfect stepping stone for them. We recruited them back to the org. They did this new role, which was a little different, and it rounded this person out in a way that gave everybody ultimate confidence, including themselves, that they could literally move anywhere in the country and be wildly successful back, as a territory manager. And that person went on to take over the territory in Texas for us, and like next 4 years was top 3 person in the country, and just unbelievably successful. They were an associate that they left the company, and like most people just like, yeah, who cares? There's like no impact on the company, right? They didn't even have customers. But when we found the right seat on the bus, because we were kind of committed to them, and we were looking at the talent, like, well, that's a really talented person, let's just round them out. And it wasn't a big change. It wasn't like taking somebody from sales and moving them into product management or engineering. It wasn't that dramatic, but a little bit different take on it. But it was, I think, really a really good example of what you're asking about. How do you apply that? Again, curiosity and commitment to the people.
I love that, because there was such a commitment to what you saw in that employee. And I'm curious because you built a business case to bring that person back. And so that likely meant you had to, present that business case, get buy-in from those around you. So did you encounter any resistance in kind of building that business case? And how do you leverage even your leadership style to kind of present that up, to kind of bring someone back in? There's a lot of steps in that. So I'd love to unpack that.
So definitely was met with resistance. So good call there. Yeah, there's 2 things I was up against. 1, just lack of experience. 2, they already left the org. Like, are they going to do it again? Are they committed? So why did they leave in the first place? And why is that going to be different this time? And you're giving this really great opportunity, to somebody that maybe or maybe not as even qualified, and also had already chosen, to leave the team. The second part was just this unique new role that we created was met with resistance because it was a new role and it was different. It wasn't just a straight quota carrying sales rep. It was like a customer development type of role that I thought and some others thought we could really leverage based on some of the timing of where our business was and some of the challenges we're facing. So yes, it was a twofold sale. And then that just comes down to, I think being able to share your vision, persuade, have a business, really good business model, including, really specific ROI on why this could work. And then, you have to yield that result with that person. I mean, that's a two-way commitment, right? So I bring this person back knowing they know that I went to bat for them and expounded, significant personal capital to make it happen. And then I think that loyalty back and forth goes a long way.
Well, Jeremy and Erika, this has been an extraordinary conversation. I'm sure that we could go over this topic for hours and hours on end. Folks, if you would like to learn more about Jeremy Laynor, please check out his bio in the show notes. Thanks, Jeremy.
Thanks for having me. Really good to catch up with both of you.
You can find more interviews on our YouTube channel at Marney Reid Presents.